Okay, good afternoon. Namaskar. Welcome those of you who are coming back for our panel discussion on standardization. Can I ask my fellow panelists to join me on stage? I'm hoping we have everybody. Thank you very much to Patrick, to Dominique. Jonathan's with us, and Tom is with us as well. Thank you very much, Jonathan. If you see your name tags. Thank you. Tom, you're there. Okay. We got you. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. Firstly, I must apologize. After all this talk about gender equality, we're not quite in the 21st century with this panel. I do apologize. But we are at least in 2023 in that we should be phygital in that Jean-Pierre Chalain should be dialing in with us from Basel, Switzerland. Jean-Pierre, are you with us? I'm sure he'll join in a minute. Thank you very much for coming back. If you're coming back in from having a quick coffee, thank you for joining. I think all the panels and their positions are clearly outlined in your papers, so I won't spend any time introducing except to say thank you very much to all of you, not just for joining, but especially for all the work that's been ongoing on this topic, which we're going to be talking about for the next hour. I'm very much hoping that Jean-Pierre is going to be found and joined online because he's been leading this work. So he is kind of the kingpin in this discussion. So I hope there's somebody behind the scenes making sure that he's able to join. So briefly to introduce myself, my name is Edward Johnson. I'm the Corporate Responsibility Director for Gemfields. It does give me great honor and privilege to be here today at the invitation of Dr. Gaetano and Steve Benson and all of the CIBJO executive directors. And it's my first visit to India and to Jaipur, so I'm especially pleased and proud to be here today. So our job for the next hour is to try to make standards, definitions, standardization, nomenclature, and statistical tolerance levels interesting for you. Quite a tough job, but I have the best panel who've been working on this for many years now. So when we were talking about it earlier, and we were thinking about where we wanted to take this discussion, we immediately, or at least I immediately, turned to the internet to find a definition of standards and the benefits of using standards. I found this interesting quote from an organization online called the BSJ, which says that standards ensure the safety, quality, and reliability of products and services. They facilitate trade, and they protect our health and the health of our environment. Now, for businesses, these standards improve systems and processes. They reduce waste, cut costs, and ensure consistency. Now, I'm sure that all of those, especially the consistency aspect, we all understand is critical in the diamond business. Hence, the standardization of diamond grading systems has been at the forefront of the industry's mind for many decades. And Tom Moses from GIA is here to talk about the history and the value and the importance of GIA's own diamond grading system, which many of us in the room are very familiar with, sometimes through our education. But I think it's important to understand why we're talking about the ISO standards being brought in here through CIBJO's work, those on the panel, and especially Jean-Pierre. This standard for the quality of small diamonds is something that CIBJO has been working on since the 1980s. And if Ken Scarrett is in the room, I'd like to name check him as being one of the leaders since the 1980s in setting up the systems to work on standardization of diamond grading systems. But there's been a significant increase in the work that CIBJO's been doing in the past few years, and it's been part of a three-step process. Many of you who read the special reports will have seen that there's been a focus on this ISO standardization through the Diamond Commission reports for the past few Congress meetings. But it really started back in 2015, and we will delve into the history of it. Jonathan, if you wouldn't mind giving us a little bit about that before Jean-Pierre comes. But it really starts with the publishing of the first ISO standard 18323 in 2015, which really stood to define and standardize how we describe diamonds. Since then, there was a step forward in September 2020 with ISO 24016, which is more on the terminology, the classification and methods used for single unmounted diamonds, loose polished goods over 1/4 carat, 25 points. Now that initiative really came about through a request from the Swiss Association for Standardization, SNV. And of course, if we think why it's coming from the Swiss, let's consider all of the polished diamonds that go in Swiss watches, which is such an important economy factor for the Swiss government and for the Swiss industry. So that work really was building on that foundation that I talked about, that Ken Scarrett and others had started back in the 1980s. And more recently, with Jean-Pierre, the Diamond Commission has announced recently work has now begun on ISO 6893, which is essentially bringing standardization to diamonds less than 1/4 carat, 25 points, and also much more standardization of the statistical tolerances that are acceptable in the systems for bulk testing of loose polished diamonds. My slight preamble there has enabled the technology of 2023 to bring Jean-Pierre online with us. Jean-Pierre, I see you on our screen there. Hopefully you're on the screen behind as well. Good, somebody's nodding. Jean-Pierre, welcome. Bienvenue.
Hello, Edward. Thank you for this invitation. I apologize that I'm not able to make it this year. After 20 years of CIBJO Congress, it's my first time not being able to join you. So I really miss you all. I'm very happy to be with you. I apologize for some technical issues. So that's the reason why I'm late. But I will be very happy to be now a panelist with you. And I'm awaiting for your questions.
Thank you. I think I will turn to you first, if I can, Jean-Pierre, since you've been leading this project. And if we can, I've given a little bit there, if you were able to hear, about the history of the work. Can you give your perspective and bring everybody who are in the room up to date on the history of all the work that CIBJO's been doing, along with ISO, on diamond classification and standardization?
Well, first of all, let's say that both CIBJO, the World Jewellery Confederation, and ISO, the International Organization for Standardization, are both international organizations. So they have a very similar structure, actually. If you look at the way that the administration is made, their members are all country members. And this is a very important parallel between the two organizations. And when these two organizations first met, as you said before, it was by 1983 where former president of CIBJO, Eric Poyser, was president or chairman of the first working group that took the leadership for drafting the first diamond grading system for ISO. That was in 1983. As you mentioned before, in the room, I'm thinking of Ken Scarab, some other people very famous were around the table. GIA was around the table, HRD was around the table, and other organizations as well. After 17 years of drafting, which is a lot of work, the document was mature enough to be presented to a vote to ISO members. And unfortunately, in 1999, the vote was not accepted. So the document was not accepted as an ISO diamond grading system. Nevertheless, people from CIBJO who participated in his first draft decided to buy the document and offer it to CIBJO, and this draft became a normative reference for diamond grading for all CIBJO laboratories. That was the PAS. PAS means publicly available specification. That was the PAS 1048. Unfortunately, for technical reasons, a PAS document cannot be updated. And therefore, this document was not evaluating as it should have evaluated following the evolution of the diamond trade. So in 2017, Dr. Gaetano Cavalieri decided to relaunch this project, and as you mentioned before, I've been convener of the relaunch working group for drafting a new ISO standard based on the previous standard that was drafted for a very long time. So we have refreshed the document for about 3 years with 10 different countries. Today, we have more than 50 diamond experts in the ISO room to draft this document. And actually, the document was adopted in the year 2020. I hope I've not been too long, but it's a very long journey, starting from 1983. So I tried to make it as short as possible.
No, that's great. Thank you very much. And Jonathan, forgive me, we didn't catch up. How long have you been involved with this project with CIBJO?
I have been chair of this ISO TC 174, which is not only handling diamond standard, it's also handling a fair number of standards related to precious metals, covering things like color of gold alloys, size of investment kilobars, a lot of analytical methods, solders of precious metals, so there's quite a long range. And I have been chair of that committee for 8 years now.
Okay, great, thank you. And we'll go to Jean-Pierre afterwards as well, but can you give us an update on the work that you're doing at the moment, especially on this new standard 6893?
So normally standards do not take so long to be published. I don't know, we are talking about something like 35 years. ISO is slow, but this is probably a record even within the organization. We would need to check. But the typical standard would take 2 to 3 years to be published. And currently we have, in the diamond area, we have, as you mentioned, the confidence in the diamond industry, which is one of the key standards. We have the grading of diamond 24016, and we have this new standard on grading of smaller diamond up to 0.25. This document is what we call a DIS, it's Draft International Standard. It's almost a finished version. which means that not only experts participating, country participating, but everyone within the ISO community may now comment on the document. And we are expecting the comment to arrive around the late of this month, early November. And if the document is accepted, then it will move to publication, and hopefully this document will be finalized mid-2024.
Okay, thank you. And without incriminating anybody, obviously, why do you feel it's taken a bit longer with this standard?
I mean, the original standard, the grading of diamonds, so larger diamonds, is, okay, I have to precise, I'm not expert at all in the diamond. I'm really on the precious metal size. And the diamond world seems to be quite a relatively small world. We often hear companies, people are in the trade for a couple of generations, something we don't see in precious metals, for example. And I think that there was quite a lot of tension accumulated over time and different perspective on what standardization should be. And it was really, really difficult to overcome. And honestly, Jean-Pierre Chalain has done an amazing job as convener of the working group to force people to work together, which sometimes is not easy. And I must say that Dr. Gaetano Cavalieri, as we all know him, has been instrumental, because when things were going too far, he would really step up and say, now you shut up and you start working together, which really, really, really helped for this diamond standard. And I think that without Jean-Pierre, without Gaetano, I would probably be still sitting here trying to explain why it would take a couple of more years to publish the documents.
I like that concept of Gaetano standing in and telling everybody to shut up and get on with it. I like that. Jean-Pierre, from your perspective as the convener on the working group, what's been your perspective leading this process? And what have been the challenges, and where do you see the successes moving forward?
Well, first of all, I should probably explain what is the role of a convener at ISO. A convener has the aim of putting the people together around the same table to come up with a document that is drafted based on a consensus. My role is not technical. I am not involved as a diamond expert. It's only my experience or my relationship with all the people around the table that enables me to make the people to speak together, to listen to every opinion on some technical points, and try to put everybody around the same consensus and draft the document. So that's my role. I am not driving the document in any technical direction at all. That's not my role at all. I'm just here to find a consensus. Jonathan mentioned that an amazing work has been done. Probably yes. On this specific standard that we are, that is now in the final draft for the quality control of small diamond batches. When the work started, there was a draft that was proposed, and this original draft was probably going too far and needed a lot of explanations. Hence, a beginning, let's say, to speak gently, a start of a discussion that was rather difficult. And therefore, as a convener, I received hundreds of comments, and that's my job, to answer each of the comments to each expert, and that was part of an amazing work to be done. Hundreds of comments to reply each other. Most of the comments, they do they are interlinked with other comments, so you have to unknit the whole comments, and finally the people came back after, I think we had 3 different meetings, but many different exchanges in between the meetings. When I speak about meetings, I mean meetings in persons. One was in Paris, one was in Berlin. I'm probably forgetting one of the meetings. And or maybe we had 2 meetings in Berlin, because the secretariat of this technical committee is DIN, the Deutsche Institut for Nomenclature, so the German institution for normalization, and therefore the meetings have been twice in Berlin. Again, after each series of written comments that the convener will receive on the document, that the document is relatively large, I think it's more than 60 pages. And after each reply of each comment, the people come together around the table and they better understand, they better agree together. The document has been redrafted quite a lot, but in a very simple way, and it is now focusing really on the goal of the main goal of this standard, which is how can you deal with the quality control of a batch that may contain several thousand of small diamonds, sometimes as small as 1 millimeter or 2 millimeters. First, it was evident for every member the nomenclature that shall be used is the nomenclature that is accepted by the whole trade, and this nomenclature has been normalized in the ISO standard 18323, which is also named Consumer Confidence in the Diamond Industry. This document gives rules for how to name a diamond, a synthetic diamond, etc., a laboratory-grown diamond, etc., etc. Second, and it was a very important step ahead the draft of this small diamond standard. The second ISO standard to which it will refer to is the standard for the diamond grading of large diamonds, which means that this new standard for small diamonds will apply exactly the same technical way of grading each single diamond that is controlled. For example, if you want to check the quality, the clarity grade of a small diamond of 1 millimeter, the judge will be the loop on the normalized line, as it is for large diamonds. If you want to control, to check the color of a small diamond, you need a normalized light, you need a master set. Everything is written in the 24016, the diamond grading standard for large diamonds. So the small diamond grading standard does not bring any point on this. It just refers to this existing standard. Now, what is the specificity of this new ISO standard for small diamond is how do we address the problem of large quantities of very small items. This problem is not new, especially on other industries. For decades, industries like pharmacy, where when they produce pills, or glass factories producing windows, then we have to control, for the windows example, how many bubbles they have per centimeter square. For pills, they will have to control the quality of the surface of the pill, etc., etc.
Jean-Pierre,
Yes?
I think you've given me a great segue into what I wanted to discuss with the rest of the panel here, if you don't mind if I interrupt, which really is to talk and to bring my colleagues in the stage here, if that's okay, Jean-Pierre, into why do we feel it's necessary? You've given your perspective on one of the challenges, but can I open it up here to, perhaps I can start with Patrick from the Federation of the Swiss Watch Industry. Why do you and why does your organization feel that it's necessary to have this new standard?
It can be resumed with the one sentence. It's the consumer confidence in the diamond industry. Even if the watch industry in the world, not only the Swiss watch industry, but the whole watch industry in the world, would like to have the confidence of their customers, consumers. And it's especially true when we are speaking about diamonds, but also when we are speaking about synthetic diamonds. So the consumer should know what they are buying. But before that, the producer, the watch companies, should know what they are buying. And it's very important that we know exactly what we do in this industry.
Thank you. And your perspective, in terms of supporting the industry, if we turn to Dominique from the Swatch Group as one of the members and actually making a large number of watches, which include a large number of diamonds, I think I've preempted my question, but why, from your perspective, is this work necessary?
These three standards are necessary because, as Patrick mentioned, we want to maintain the consumer confidence in our products. All of you know that the Swiss watch industry is well known for its very high quality. And for this, we want to be sure that the customer has all information on the product he buys. And the ISO standards are a good response to this need. That's why when we heard about the first standard on the nomenclature, the 18323, we think it was good, but not enough. And that's why we help CIBJO, Jean-Pierre, and many experts of the world to bring to an end the new standard, the ISO 24016, on diamond above 0.25 carat. But as you already guess, if I exclude the jewelry industry in our Swiss watch brand, we have not so much diamond bigger than 0.25 carat. The most important for the Swiss watch industry is in the small diamond. That's why now we are very active on this new standard for small diamond. It's very important for us to have this quality founded on the two previous ISO standards, nomenclature and the 24016 on polished diamond, which define also the method control on this diamond.
And you have 3 Swiss citizens on the panel, so I really don't want to give the audience that this standard was made by and for the Swiss watchmaker. Obviously, ISO standards are international, and during the course of drafting of this standard for sampling and grading small diamonds, we have seen a lot of interest from other countries, and since we are in India, I think it's worth to mention that India was very supportive as one of the largest producers of those batches. For India, it's also interesting to have a way to deal with customers in a very unified method, using always the same type of sampling, using always the same type of procedures. It makes the market much more transparent, and this is really what ISO is about, together with protecting the consumer, as mentioned by Dominique and Patrick.
Yeah.
Yes, and perhaps something else. We have also jewelry brands, and they are very interested in this standard. It's not only for watches, worldwide watches, but also for jewelry brands.
Great, thank you. Can I take it back a little bit and, Tom, bring you into the conversation really about, when we talk about standards and when we talk about diamonds, everybody in my world, at least from a GIA background, immediately goes to the GIA diamond grading system, which, if you can just give a little bit of a history about, I think most people don't realize it started as an educational tool. So from your perspective, the history of the GIA diamond grading standard, how important has standards been from GIA's perspective for the diamond business over the past number of decades?
Thank you, Edward, and thank you for the opportunity to join the panel today. And before I start, though, I heard Iris talk about well-balanced panels, and I think this one needs some work. So I think next time we'll
Mea culpa.
balance this a little bit better. I also, Jean-Pierre, thank you for the review from the 80s, and Ken Sterrett for leading that with my colleagues. And although you described it perhaps ending in a failure, I think a lot of progress was made during that period, and a lot of the inconsistencies and a lot of agreements were made. But Edward, to your point, if you allow me to reflect back, not to the mid-1980s, but the mid-1940s. And it was then that Richard Liddicoat decided there was a need for some of the reasons that you talked about, Edward, when you talked about standards and the purpose of quality and reproducibility and confusion that existed at that time. And you are correct that the system was developed as a teaching tool at that time to allow our students to compare many disparate grading systems that were used in the industry. That evolved and was developed and really became then, at the request of industry, that GIA would begin to actually issue opinions or reports in 1953. I think another key thing that I think most people aren't aware of at that time, we actually, to develop the yardstick, the DVC yardstick that you're all familiar with, we had a colorimeter in place. So we're actually using instrumental aid also in developing the system. So, fast forwarding, as the decades have progressed and GIA has now created hundreds of millions of diamonds using that system. And there's been refinements along the way. And in fact, when we talk about, I mentioned about I think the consistency that exists in many of the systems today. One change that was made in the early 80s that is a little bit different than some of the other systems that are in place, adding internally flawless, and as opposed to just having loop clean or flawless that exist in other systems. And so it has evolved with industry needs. But Edward, that's kind of the background, both from the work that went on in the 80s and the early days of developing the system.
Thank you. I mean, when we first started talking about this, we were thinking to discuss today the differences between the GIA diamond grading standard and what you've been working on along with Jean-Pierre. But in fact, we realized that the differences were far less than the similarities. There is much more that brings these two standards together than those that divide them. From both of your perspective, and maybe I can turn to you first, where do you see, and along with Jean-Pierre, if you can join in as well, the main differences between the work that you've been doing to the more widely known, especially in the US, the GIA diamond grading system?
So first of all, it's important to recall that ISO standards are used worldwide. They are usually very well recognized, but there are some countries that use them more than others. And USA is not necessarily a huge fan of ISO standards and prefer to use other tools to control how the market is functioning. It's just a business and political decision. There's no good and right answer here. The GIA grading system and the ISO 24016 are extremely similar in terms of nomenclature, in terms of how the reporting is done. Perhaps the main difference is how do we compare, to what do we compare the color of the diamonds. And in the ISO standard, we are using the CIBJO master set, and GIA is using its own master set. And as a matter of fact, perhaps that the two master sets are completely equivalent. No one knows really about that. So I think that's a very good point you mentioned, Ed. Perhaps the differences are very, very limited.
Jean-Pierre, from a gemological perspective, where do you see the overlap, should we say? So
I would like to come back on the example of the color grading and the reference that Jonathan just made about the diamond master set of CIBJO, the master set CIBJO C1, was originally formed by BL and with against the GIA master set in the 80s. So
thank you.
The reason why CIBJO wanted its own master set is because they wanted all the diamonds of the series to be exactly of the same weight, with faceted girdle, with some very similar proportions, so that it's it's an excellent master set. Yeah, that's the point. And I would say it's not, if we compare both systems, CIBJO and ISO and GIS, I would say that the GIS standard, except for the reference to the color grading system, because inside the ISO standard there is not references to the GIA master set. The GIA standard is included inside the ISO standard 2416. You have the possibility to, if we take the example of the clarity grade, we have the possibility to grade a diamond as flawless or internally flawless as GIA does, or to use the nomenclature of CIBJO, which is look clean. So you see that it's a very open system, and so I would say that there are more than similar systems. They include the GIA ones, except for the color grading system.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Jean-Pierre. I think another important similarity or consistency, which actually was discussed in the 80s, but I think crystallized more recently, is handling and the nomenclature for synthetic or man-made diamonds. And I think both systems are quite clear and consistent with the nomenclature.
Definitely.
If I can turn again to the Swiss watch industry, which, as we've discussed already, is one factor in the standard moving forward. But do you see a preference as a European-based business and association with using an ISO standard as opposed to another which is more global?
For us, what important is that the credibility of the standard has to be proven. And ISO standards are well known, and with these 3 standards, we cover the need of transparency we need now. So with transparency, we also maintain this famous consumer confidence. And that's all.
Thank you. And Patrick, your perspective on that as well?
Yeah, exactly. As you know, ISO standards are made by all countries around the world. It's not a European committee. It's a worldwide committee. We have experts from India. We have experts from China. We have experts from Japan, from Israel. We have also from Iran. So, of course, we have European countries. But these standards, all of them are made by consensus within all those countries. And as Jonathan said before, even the other countries around the world could comment on the final draft of a standard. So it's open really to everybody without any exception. So for the watch company in Switzerland, but all around the world, it's important that we have a well-recognized worldwide standards.
Please not to forget that the Swiss watch brands are Swiss because the headquarters is in Switzerland, but that's a worldwide company.
Thank you for pointing that out. The supply chain is worldwide as well.
Thank you. I think I'd like to make a couple points about the GI system. Certainly, we've made it accessible and available through our education. And Jean-Pierre talked about GI creates color master sets based on that original set that was established in the 1940s. So it is certainly possible to, for someone outside of GI to attain and use the GI system. And just one other comment, segueing to the small diamond system, and we haven't mentioned this publicly, but we will begin testing, take delivery of our first alpha version of a fully robotic instrument that will do diamonds down to about 2 millimeters, full grading. And we expect to have full production probably by mid-year 2024 to be able to deal with this large number of small diamonds that will not only grade them, but will also test for treatment or screen out any synthetics.
So I want to leave some time for any questions from the floor, but just wrapping up a little bit to bring this discussion between us to a close. The one area that my understanding is that with the GIA standard, there's not much specified around batch testing of diamonds. Yet the main area for this new standard 6893 is that that's the direction it's going in. So I know that your statistical analysis, and I told you that we'd keep statistical tolerance levels interesting in this discussion. But from your perspective, where is this 6893 really going to add value to the industry?
Well, the problem is you cannot test 10,000, 20,000 or 50,000 items, whatever they are, but especially if they are diamonds. So you need to randomly select a number of them and test them, and from the result determine whether the batch is passing the quality control or not. And the difficulty is that if every seller and every buyer around the rule applies different sampling tests and different rules to accept or reject a batch, it's going to be extremely difficult to have occurrence on the market. So I think that here the main advantage of this new standard to be published very, very soon is that it gives a tool to everyone in the diamond industry to align on one single process to determine whether a batch of small diamonds is compatible with its specification or not. I think that's really the main advantage. And in general, as for any ISO standard, ISO standards are only useful if they are used. They are never mandatory. ISO standards are not meant to be mandatory. So ISO standards are interesting when the industry starts to use it, when the consumer, the buyer, the seller request everyone in the supply chain to work following a given standard. And it's also where organizations like CIBJO have a very, very strong impact, because if they explain to their member what the standards are and suggest their member to use a standard, it can significantly change the way the industry is dealing with those tools.
Thank you, Tom.
And Jonathan and Patrick, Dominique, I fully agree with this initiative and the need. It's certainly estimated that more than 90% of polished diamonds weigh less than 1/10 of a carat. So clearly there is a need to address that. So we look forward also, as I said, to be able to support that through automation. Thank you.
Thanks. Jean-Pierre, bringing you in, your perspective as well. And if I can ask you to take your convener hat on and put the hat of SSEF on, how will the 6893 standard benefit the work of laboratories?
By bringing more work, probably. Because if you have a harmonized system recognized by the majority of clients, then this will bring you some more work. On the contrary of having discrepancies in procedures and test results, if you harmonize the way of grading or of controlling small diamonds, this will bring you more work, for sure. Now, because you gave me the floor, may I jump on what Tom mentioned before? He mentioned a very important point, and thank you, Tom, for this. He mentioned the use of instrumentations for diamond grading. We know that colorimetry is used for a long time to help in the decision of color grades of diamonds. We know that also the clarity grades is also existing machineries to assess the clarity grade of diamonds exist today on the trade. And the ISO standard, as it is drafted at the moment, either the 2416 for large diamonds or the one for small diamonds, do not include instrumentations. But now, if I may, I would like to give the floor to Patrick to explain that an ISO standard is a living document. Inside ISO, maybe Patrick can explain it much better than I, an ISO standard will be reviewed systematically every, I think it's 5 years, Patrick?
Correct, yes. Every ISO standard is systematically reviewed after 5 years of existing. That means the country who are member of the technical committee should review the standard and decide whether they will confirm it, they would revise it, or even withdraw it, which is rarely the case. But that's a very important process, that for every single ISO standard, we know that every 5 years, if it's confirmed, that means the industry, the consumers, all people involved in this field are okay with the standard. And that means it's always up to date. And even more, when there is a new, for example, a new technology or something else, we can even revise within the 5 years. So by the decision of the technical committee, if there's a need to revise a standard after 2 years, it's always possible. So as Jean-Pierre said, ISO standards are living. They are always up to date, and that also makes the confidence of the users and the whole people of the industry.
Thank you. I mean, I realize that this is dangerous because we cancelled the coffee break before and you may be all dying to have a coffee. But I'd really like to turn over to you and see if anybody has any questions for this work. And I'm very pleased to see that somebody's raised their hand. Mr. Rui, somebody will bring a microphone to you, I'm sure, or at least I will. Somebody go?
Yep.
Catch? No, all right.
Actually, I thought you were going to throw me the microphone. I want to ask something. In diamond grading, for example, the problem or the issue is consistency. For example, within the GIA, there is consistency in the results if the same stones get submitted over and over again. And if the standards are going to be broadened as an ISO standard, for example, what is the guarantee that the consumer and the trade will have on that respect? Meaning that it's not only about terminology, it's also the grading standards, the kind of lighting, the kind of instrumentation, the calibration of the instrumentation. There is a lot involved in that. And if there is an update on ISO or on the standards, will the diamonds that have been graded 2-3 years before have to be regraded again to be in line? So those are the issues, the real issues that probably the industry would like to be addressed. Thank you.
Yeah, so if I may answer at least part of those questions. Yes, ISO standards are changing from time to time. And when they are changing, you always see with the ISO the year when the version was published. So you can definitely have a grading done towards 24016 version 2020, and perhaps another grading with the same standard version 2050. Now, I think the technical committee is smart enough to realize that you are not going to change the master set at every revision. That would be against the interest of literally everyone, including the end consumer. So if there is a change in the standard, it would have been for a very good reason. And regarding the question on how do you calibrate, this is, remember that like many ISO standards, 24016 is a technical standard. It defines what are the characteristics you have for a product or an analysis. To ensure that a laboratory is using such technical standard properly, you can be accredited toward a given ISO standard like 17025, which deals with the calibration and the analysis laboratory. So you can very much be a laboratory which is accredited 17025 for diamond grading towards 24016. This is really the area where you have an external accreditation body confirming that your laboratory is following the procedure properly. Otherwise, you are right, anyone can use that standard without any external control. But fortunately, in ISO ecosystem, if I may say, there are accreditations to ensure that laboratories are working properly.
Yeah, why do you always
if I may, I'm sorry to...
No, you go first, Jean-Pierre, and then Tom.
Thank you. Sorry to be impolite. The technology is... I'm very far away from you. Sorry for this. No, I just wanted to mention that inside the room where you are now, I know at least 2 laboratories that are ISO 17025 for diamond grading.
Thank you for pointing that out, Tom.
I would just add to, certainly we're familiar with the ISO auditing that goes on. We're certified here, also in India. But I think additionally things that Jay does to ensure, do the best we can to create consistency. So we have a metrology team that of more than a dozen people who are monitoring and calibrating devices every day, throughout the day, around the world. We have, each of our labs is an ISO level 8 clean environment. And I think as we talk about instrumentation, we try to add, of course, more precision or more accuracy with more precision, but the environmental issues become more and more important. And I think you raise a very good point. I mean, I think it's an ongoing, we want more accuracy, so we develop instruments with more precision, but then the environment has to be even more closely monitored. Thank you.
Do we have any more questions from the floor? Iris in the middle. Oh, would you mind if we'll go to Dipal first, because he's got a microphone very close, and then Iris afterwards.
My question is about the sampling plan you guys are using in the standard. There is no sampling plan in the world which will basically give you 100% guarantee that no non-conforming article will go to the marketplace. But definitely there is a probability of non-conforming article going to marketplace, and that probability is probably mentioned in the standard. What exactly you do if a lot is non-conforming? Like in jewelry, when the jewelry lot comes to us for hallmarking, if it is a non-conforming article, either we carry out 100% inspection or put some mark on it. So if a batch is found non-conforming, what do you do with those diamonds?
Well, I mean, the standard is used basically between a vendor and a buyer. So if the lot is non-conforming, it goes back to the seller. And then the seller probably, I imagine, has to regrade the whole lot, or possibly even a couple of lots properly. It's simply it's a Boolean. It's either you accept the whole batch with potentially some defects, but within the specification, or you reject everything. Correct?
Yes, may I?
Dominique.
Perhaps some points. This sampling standard, I understand it can be scary, but it's a very old ISO standard. It's nothing new. It's well used in the watchmaking industry. We are used to the standards, and you can be sure it works. And you have to try it. I know we are more used to this standard because we are more industrial, less artisanal. But for a very little small diamonds, you have to work with homogeneity lots, and then you make a sampling. It's more economical as soon as you have a homogeneous lot.
Dipal, you know, the jewelry is the same. In jewelry, the whole lot is rejected. It's easy to remelt. Diamond, you won't remelt them. You will ask, or you will basically force the seller to handle its material, regrade it, grade it differently, remix it. That's basically the seller's decision.
But
if the seller wants to throw the batch away, it's probably fine too, but I don't think it will happen.
My worry is, because knowing the statistical part of every sampling plan, because I myself write the sampling plan, if I submit the same lot again, there is a very high possibility that lot may pass. Why can't we carry out the 100% inspection and remove the non-conforming articles, diamond, from there? Because there should be some kind of procedure for that, because the sampling plan which you are using in this standard is very, very old. This sampling plan is actually, I don't want to say, but not suitable for this particular purpose.
It's statistics. It's never 100%.
Yes.
That's absolutely clear.
Yeah, all right.
Yep. There
Thank
is
you.
always a risk. The risk is for the buyer or for the supplier. And for the buyer, there are almost 10% risk that they buy diamonds that are not conform. So you have to discuss with the supplier where you place the risk, and then as soon as it is fixed, then the buyer has to accept the lot if the laboratory has found that not enough or the diamonds were accepted.
So one of the objectives that I set with the panel before was to spark debate. And I think this is a good example of where there is more discussion that needs to take place. Perhaps I can invite you to have that offline after the event. Thank you, Dipal. Iris, if we could turn to you for you.
Yeah, okay. So this panel was actually music to my ears. And I'm not a technical expert. And Tom, wonderful to see you. And we're very proud that GIA is also a member of WGI 2030. I didn't want to ask a question, but I actually wanted to make a comment. And I wanted to say, Jonathan, I want to congratulate you all for the work that you're doing for the industry. Because maybe something that I've seen over the past 23 years working in this industry, it's very difficult for us sometimes to look outside and have an objective view, an independent view, and to have really solid standards to support that consumer confidence, Patrick, that you were so speaking about, and Dominique. And so I just want to say I applaud your work, and I think the industry needs to look wider and, and strengthen some of our systems with ISO, because it is independent, it has a full consultation process, and I'm happy Gaetano pushed you all to work together. So just wanted to say well done.
Thank you. I think that's a great last word to finish on. We bring it back, as we often do in CIBJO conversations, to consumer confidence. And all of the discussions so far today have been about protecting consumer confidence. And this may be coming from a different angle. I hope we've made statistical tolerance levels exciting for you. But it does get back to that consumer confidence. So Dominique, Patrick, Tom, Jonathan, and especially Jean-Pierre, we're sorry you can't be with us. Thank you very much to all of you, and thank you. Now you can have some coffee. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for being here. I would request you all to please take a step forward for the memento. And to give away the memento, I request, of course, our president again, Metano sir and Shri Nirmal Bardia sir, to please take over the stage.
Thank you. In the middle. Shall I hold it?
Yes.
This way up?
I like this. It's like this.
Good. Good. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Should we have a picture? One last picture. Oh, we've lost Tom. I'm sorry.
It's okay, no problem.
It's mine.